Progress.
Mitigation.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Chantel Dirksen, your Remote Participation Manager, and welcome to the DNS Security Threat Mitigation Program webinar on the 22nd of July, 2021. Please note that this session is being recorded and follows the ICANN expected standards of behavior. Questions will be taken at the end of today's presentation and will only be read aloud if submitted within the Q&A pod. I will read them aloud during the time set by the moderator of the session. All participants in the session may make comments in the chat. Please use the drop-down menu in the chat pod and select Respond to all panelists and attendees. This will allow everyone to view your comment. Participants who have internet connectivity issues or wish to listen to a language other than English must dial into the session by using the ICANN Adigo International dial-in number list, which I will post the link to in the chat shortly. With that, I will hand the floor over to Russ Weinstein to begin. Russ, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chantel, and thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm excited to be here and talking to you all about ICANN's DNS Security Threat Mitigation Program, introducing it to the community and taking you through a short tour of some of the things we're doing to help the internet in this important topic. As Chantel mentioned, my name is Russ Weinstein. I'm a vice president in the Global Domains Strategy team. I'm responsible for our accounts and services. And I'm also the program manager for this program. I'm joined today by several of my colleagues from across ICANN. We have Chris Baer, Director of Strategic Initiatives. We have Samana Tajali-Zada Hub, the Lead Security, Stability, and Resiliency Specialist. We have Jamie Hedlund, our Senior Vice President for Contractual Compliance and Consumer Safeguards. Jan Agrinick, Senior Manager, Contractual Compliance, Risk, and Audit. Roger Lim, Director, Contractual Compliance. And Patrick Jones, Senior Director from Global Stakeholder Engagement. Next. For today's call, Chris and I will introduce you to the program. Samana will provide a brief overview of DAR and DNSTICR, two of the programs run through our Octo team. Jan, Jamie, and Roger will share some of the things we do from a compliance and enforcement perspective. I'll share a bit about the engagement we have with the contracted parties and the work we're doing with them. And Patrick will share some of the great work the Global Stakeholder Engagement team has been doing. Then we'll look ahead and wrap up with a short Q&A. As Chantel said, a reminder to please put questions in the dedicated Q&A pod in Zoom. You can go ahead and put those in throughout the presentation. We may be able to get to some of them in parallel. And just a reminder, this is an introductory webinar. We won't be getting too deep into any of the topics presented here, but based on your feedback, we can assess what topics would benefit from more dedicated sessions. With that, let's get going. So a bit of background about the program. As many of you know, a core part of ICANN's mission is to ensure secure, stable, and resilient domain name system as part of a single interoperable internet. And ICANN's always undertaken initiatives to improve security, stability, and resilience of the DNS and its work. It's foundational to our core and purpose. But interoperability depends on trust and cooperation. And when domain names are being used to perpetrate DNS security threats, it's not only an SSR issue, but it harms that trust. Over the past several years, ICANN's initiated several activities to help address the issues of DNS security threats. We've DAR, we've done compliance audits, we've done a great deal of capacity development and training programs, but there was not always a clear through line to what we were doing. So it was about, I guess, a little over 18 months ago, because we were still in offices, and Jorn and I were chatting about this topic, and we hit on a gap. And when it came to the work we were doing related to DNS abuse, what was missing was org-wide coordination and collaboration. There were cross-functional aspects to the work we were doing, but it was lacking overall cohesion. So for those of you that know Jorn, when you chat with him, you end up leaving with new work. And so here I am, the program manager for the DNS Security Threat Mitigation Program at ICANN. But this need to coordinate and create better visibility internally and collaboration led to the creation of this program. But through that coordination and collaboration, we've been tapping into better ways of thinking and identifying different pieces of the puzzle by utilizing the whole organization's resources. So like many things over the years at ICANN, this is an evolution of things we were already doing, a maturation, formalization of a program. Next. So our approach on the program is three main areas of focus. The first is to be a trusted source of objective information to support the community's understanding. Core to ICANN's mission is to support the community and ensure they have a robust discourse about topics. By conducting research and providing data and expertise, we're helping the community have fact-based discussions about the topic. We provide tools for the community, and you'll see this more in subsequent slides, but the tools come in a variety of forms. One such is using the expertise we have in-house to conduct trainings and discussions with different parts of the ecosystem, helping institutions and users prevent victimization, helping contracted parties understand the data we have and see, and providing assistance if requested about how they can mitigate security threats. Additionally, we have tools such as the DNS Sticker program, which you'll hear more about today. And the third pillar is enforcing the contractual provisions. There's existing requirements in both the registry and registrar agreements that create certain obligations related to DNS security threats and other malicious and abusive use of domain names. And we enforce those both through our enforcement processes, following up on complaints from the community, and our audit tools to identify issues for correction and remediation and to surface gaps that need further exploration. Next. So our program is focused on DNS security threats. It started with the broad perspective of DNS abuse and focused in on DNS security threats. And there's a reason why we're doing this. We recognize the discussion of DNS abuse is one that still belongs to the community. The community is discussing what the problem is and how best to address it. And we have trust in the multi-stakeholder model to do this and are here to support you. An important part of that discussion should be to keep in mind ICANN's role in the ecosystem and the remit for the institution as defined in the bylaws, and specifically the prohibition on content regulation, and that our activities are to preserve and enhance SSR in the DNS, and that our policies should be about allocation of domain names related to openness, interoperability, resilience, and security and stability. So while the community has not yet coalesced on a clear definition of DNS abuse, we focus our efforts on DNS security threats. Those are the things you see on the screen here: phishing, malware, botnets, farming, and spam when used as a delivery mechanism for other security threats, as a vector, some call it. And this ties back to the advice we got from the GAC back in 2013, what manifested itself in specification 11.3b of the registry agreement. And it's also pretty consistent with what the contracted parties have defined as their definition of abuse, DNS abuse. Now I'll pass this to Chris Baer, who will explain a little bit more about the governance of the program.
Thank you, Russ. And I want to thank everyone for coming today. I'm really excited to talk about our program. As Russ mentioned, about 18 months ago, the conversations around this program started. It was an evolution of all the work that had been ongoing within ICANN and the interest in the community. And last spring, we officially launched the program internally. The main purpose of the program is listed here. It's to make the internet safer for end users by reducing the rate of DNS security threats across the internet. It's an aspirational goal. It's one that we look at when we think about the work that we're doing and how we're aligning on the activities that are going on within the organization. The program itself has 4 objectives that we've listed here. The first is to create a collaborative platform, as Russ mentioned, some way to see all the activities that are going on within ICANN, not just the projects like DAR and DNSTICR, but the ongoing activities as well. To also raise awareness about the DNS security threats, not just with the community and externally, but also internally with ICANN staff. So we're all on the same page when we talk about this. And we also are working to gain recognition of ICANN as a trustworthy source of fact-based information that can be used for measurement and analysis of what's going on around the DNS security threats. Additionally, the goal is to reduce the rate of DNS security threats. That is one of the objectives as well. So these are all 4 things that are considered whenever we're talking about the activities of the program, whenever we're looking at what's happening. Next slide, please. In this slide, we look a little bit about the structure of how we've put the program together. So the program has a steering committee, and it's made up of cross-functional members across ICANN at various levels who provide guidance. They have visibility into all of the activities, the projects, the initiatives, and all the operational activities that occur within the organization. And there's representation in the steering committee for discussion to see what areas can be improved, what areas could be changed, and what things we could add. So that strategy, that guidance is what the steering committee is designed to do. And over the course of time, we've built this structure to allow for us to have those discussions. Now, one thing to note is the actual operation, the running of these projects, initiatives, and operational activities still reside in the departments they existed in before. But this layer at the top allows for that alignment across all of these so that we can work towards achieving the objectives and the goal that we mentioned in the prior slide. So with that, I'd like to hand it off to Samana to start talking about some of those projects.
Thank you, Chris. I'm Samaneta Jalizada-Hoop, and I'm happy to present some of the projects that are ongoing in the OCTO team to the community. So the first project is that you may all be familiar with is the Domain Abuse Activity Reporting Tool, DAR. The goal of the system is to study and report on the DNS security threat concentrations within top-level domain TLD registries. The overarching goal of the project is to develop a methodology that is robust and reliable enough, and also that is reproducible by anybody who wants to reproduce it, and can be used by the community to make informed policy decisions. The project uses as an input zone files and reputation data from reputation block lists, and it creates daily and monthly reports as an output. Since June 2020, we have 17 CCTLDs who volunteered to join the project. And since then, they are also receiving individualized monthly reports. At the moment, the project is at the state of adding more metrics to it. So now we are looking into gaining access to registration data so that we can have metrics for registrars as well. Next, please. This slide shows an example of the data that is visualizations that are based on the DAR data. So based on the data, we can go back to October 2017. So we can do historical analysis and time series analysis. We can see trends. As you can see in the plots, in the upper plot, you can see the evolution of domains in GTLD zones over time. And in the bottom plot, you can see how security threat domains in raw counts has been evolved over time up until June 2021. Next slide, please. This is another example from June 2021 DAR monthly report. This is just to demonstrate that based on the data of DAR, we can also separate security threats. We can see basically GTLDs in perspective to each other, and also how they are, what is the concentration of security threats in proportion to the sizes of their zones. Next, please. The other project that Octo is currently working on and is DNS Sticker, Domain Name Security Threat Identification, Collection and Reporting Tool. We've started working on this tool ever since the pandemic started. So the project looks for malicious registrations that are related to pandemic. For instance, there is a list of words, keywords that it filters out, like COVID and pandemic, and also translations into other languages. What it does is then look for evidence from third-party sources to see if it matches what others also reported. This project is mainly focused on phishing and malware distribution, and we report our findings once we have enough evidence. We send the report to the registrars, which includes the evidence that we found, the screenshots, if it's appropriate, and the details of the DNS records, name servers and IP addresses. Next, please. This is an example plot from the data that is generated via the DNS Sticker tool. So from January 2020 to July 2021, the tool detected around 317,000 pandemic-related domains. We do not make distinction between sorry, this is the total legitimate and malicious domains, focused only on phishing and malware. And the plot also shows, so the blue line shows the total domains that the tool has been detected, and the red line shows the number of domains that out of total for which we found additional evidence. So from the 200,000 domains that were pandemic related that were detected, around 6% of them we could find evidence, one or more reports in phishing and malware, reputation list, and had name servers which they were resolved to, or had an IP address. For around 1.8% of these domains, we had high confidence reports. So what we did, we reported, we had around 300 reports sent up to today. Yeah, today. That was it from the Octo tool. With that, I would like to hand in to Jan.
Yes, hello. My name is Jan Agranenik, and I'm overseeing all audit-related activities within ICANN compliance. In the past, prior to 2019, we performed what we call full-scale compliance audits. In the area of DNS security threats, we mainly looked at registrars and registries' formal compliance with obligations directly related to publishing abuse reporting contacts and descriptions of policies and procedures around handling of such reports. Back then, there was no particular emphasis given to this area, and therefore no deep testing was done. For registries, we also looked at security threat reports in the full-scale audits. But all we did essentially was to verify that they periodically perform some type of analysis as required by Spec 11.3b. Again, these obligations, I'm talking about the abuse-related obligations, were just a part of large full-scale audits along with many other obligations. At the end of 2018, we started our first full-scale, targeted audit aimed specifically at registry operators' compliance with registry agreement obligations related to handling of DNS security threats. Somewhat deep testing was performed as much as we were able to do within what's allowed and written in registry agreement. We did ask for information and documentation that many registries considered to be out of scope of the registry agreement. So some of them did not respond at all. And though we're still asking these questions because it would provide everybody a insight into the area of this growing interest, which is DNS abuse we're talking about. A report was published in 2019 for this audit. Somewhat similar audit, but in the registrar population was started in February of this year. It was aimed at reviewing registrar compliance with RIA obligations related to DNS security threats reporting and handling. We'd like to thank registrars who happen to be part of this audit for cooperation. A report is currently being finalized and will be published soon. Next slide, please.
So I think that's my cue to talk about this slide. This is Jamie Headland. It's great to be here with everyone. This is a slide that's similar to one that we've presented at many previous ICANN meetings, and it shows complaint metrics related to abuse complaints. These are complaints submitted against registrars for any kind of abuse, not just DNS security threats. Under the registrar accreditation agreement, registrars have an obligation to investigate and respond to all reports of abuse. And so during this 13-month period since from July 2020 to June of this year, we received about 3,100 complaints. What's interesting, there are a couple of things that are interesting. One is the volume, but also the fact that almost 8 out of 10 of those were closed because they were invalid. And they were invalid primarily because the complainant did not provide evidence that it had contacted the registrar first before coming to compliance to try to have give the registrar an opportunity to resolve the complaint. Many others were also closed because they were against country code top-level domain operators, which are outside of the scope of the RIA. And others because they asked us to take direct action against a website whose content the complainant believed was infringing. So, and that's also outside of our scope. Of the valid complaints, these are the ones where we did in fact investigate and passed on the complaint to the relevant registrar. About 76% of them resulted in the registrar actually suspending the name. So what we have found is that with valid complaints, the registrars do in fact comply with their obligations under the RAA. And very few of them go to a third notice, and none actually over the past period went to a formal breach notification. What's not shown here is the volume of complaints that are alleging DNS security threat are present in a domain name. During the same period, about half of the complaints of the 3,100 there were about DNS security threats, and about half of those were invalid, so slightly better, but still a high ratio of invalid complaints. And that's a concern because for a couple of reasons. One, but the main one being that it means that the compliance team spends an inordinate amount of time dealing with complaints that are not properly formed, and that takes away from our ability to address legitimate complaints that may or may not, pose a threat to security and stability. So for information about how to submit a valid complaint, I now turn it over to Roger Lim.
Thank you, Jamie. I'm Roger Lim from the Contractual Compliance team. So as Jamie mentioned, there are a large number of complaints that are invalid. So we wanted to take this opportunity to highlight some key points regarding filing abuse complaints with ICANN, and hopefully increase the number of valid complaints that we work on. So the first thing you should do before filing a complaint is actually to look up the abusive domain name on lookup.icann.org, where you will see a listing for the registrar name and the registrar's abuse contact email address. So please take note of this information. Next, please send an abuse report to the registrar at the registrar abuse contact email address, along with any evidence of the abusive activity associated with the domain name. Now, please wait a reasonable time for the registrar to investigate and respond to your abuse report. Next, if you do not receive a response after a reasonable time, please file an abuse complaint with ICANN at the link below. All right. Once you click on this link, you will be asked to fill up a complaint form that has a few pages. The key items that you should include in the complaint form are, firstly, the abusive domain name itself. You will be asked to attach a copy of the abuse report that you sent to the registrar, and also any evidence of the abuse that you're complaining about. You will also be asked to provide details of the issue in the form, along with your email address, so that ICANN is able to contact you. Once you have completed the complaint submission, you will receive an email from compliance-cases@icann.org, providing you with a case number. So please reference this case number in any communications with ICANN, and the ICANN Contractual Compliance staff will review your complaint and get back to you. If everything is in order, ICANN will confirm your complaint and work with the registrar regarding your complaint. However, if there are missing items or further clarification is required, you will receive a follow-up email at the email address that you entered in the complaint form. Emails will be sent from the compliance-cases@icann.org email address. So please look out for that. With that, you now have the key points regarding filing abuse complaints with ICANN. We have provided the links in the chat window, so for that, for easy reference. Next, I will hand over to Russ. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. So as I mentioned, I reside in the global domains and strategy team, and what me and my team spend a lot of their time focusing on is working with the contracted parties and learning and understanding about the ecosystem that the contracted parties participate in. But until we organized this program, me and my team were not spending much time thinking about or learning about DNS security threats and how we can support the contracted parties' efforts to mitigate those threats. And now that's changed quite a bit over the last year or so. We have more regular engagement on the topic and are discussing opportunities and challenges more deliberately, both internally and with the contracted parties, the stakeholder groups themselves. We've also taken a number of initiatives over the last year or so, where we've consciously improved our questions related to the DNS abuse obligations in the registrar accreditation application. And this is to ensure we qualify registrars who demonstrate comprehension and competence around the contractual requirements they're about to undertake. We've improved our operation of a service we call the expedited Registry Security Response, or ERSR. This is a service that enables registries to request limited contractual waivers so that they can take action to mitigate a security or stability incident. We often see this utilized when registries are working to mitigate the impact of a command and control botnet or widespread malware. So we've improved the effectiveness of that service. And we've also recognized the need to extend that service to be available for registrars as well. And so we're getting ready to launch that complementary service in the next several weeks. We're also exploring with the contracted parties how to develop more common understanding of expectations, whether it's things already obligated by the contract or best practices, and to potentially produce new data sets for the community. And you may have seen a blog I posted with Samana right around the time of the last ICANN meeting, where we're in conversations with the contracted parties about potentially using a data set we already have to extend DAR to the registrar level. So there's a number of things we're doing more directly with the contracted parties in our efforts to support them. And another piece is the work that the Octo team helps us with in providing training and counseling, coaching to contracted parties around the data that they get from us and what we see in terms of patterns and that sort of thing. So a number of good initiatives going on already, and some new ones that have taken flight since the creation of this program. With that, I'll pass it to Patrick, who will talk more about our outreach activities.
Thank you, Russ. I'm Patrick Jones from ICANN's Global Stakeholder Engagement Team. And today I'm giving an overview of some of the education and outreach efforts on DNS security threat mitigation that we've done from January to the present. Our technical engagement staff in the Office of the CTO team and our Global Stakeholder Engagement Team, we regularly speak on at regional virtual events on DNS security topics. We often deliver trainings on DNS security extensions, DNSSEC. We are, as well as on abuse mitigation issues, particularly for our country code TLD partners, our regional stakeholders, and law enforcement entities. We've delivered 64 sessions since January of 2021 across all of our regions. As Samana mentioned, we're having some particular outreach to country code top level domain registries to encourage them to join the DAAR project. And we're encouraging regional partners to participate in our internet health indicators effort. Our Octo team has presented some research and their papers that they're regularly publishing on DNS security measurement and the research that their team is doing. The team has also updated its course material on ICANN Learn and published a training curricula led by the Octo technical engagement team. Russ, I believe I pass it back to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Patrick. I think Chris is actually going to wrap it up for us before we hit the Q&A. So I'll give it over to him. Thanks.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, Russ. So let's talk a little bit about the next steps of what the program is working on. Obviously, we're continuing to work on the items we talked about, but we want to call attention to the fact that we've got that registrar audit final report that will be coming out that Jan mentioned in Contractual Compliance. There is the recent expansion that we announced during ICANN 71 of DNSTICR to include more language diversity support. There are enhancements to DAAR that we've talked about, and I think Samana mentioned the idea of adding additional data to enhance that as well. We continue to work on tools that will help contracted parties to actually effectively do address the abuse the way that they're required to do so. And we've also continued to work through the various events that are out there to do capacity development. And as Patrick just mentioned, the other outreach that it goes on to collaborate with the community, but also to raise awareness and understanding of DNS abuse, and in particular the security threat mitigations that we're working on. There's continual development on the actual presentations that occur based upon the changes that we evolve in the work we're doing. In addition to that, this program has spent a fair amount of time working with the board as well to help support them in their understanding of DNS abuse and ICANN's remit and technical capabilities within that space, as well as helping them to understand the community recommendations that are impacting or that are related to DNS abuse, and assess how that interacts with the efforts that ICANN is working on.
Chris, apology to interrupt. Would you speak up a little clearly, louder, closer to the microphone, please?
Sure. So with that, we did recently launch a web page, which at this point has a lot of the information we talked about today, and you'll see that the page is listed here. And there was also a recent announcement that Russ made about not just this webinar, but about that page as well. So you can find it on the ICANN website as well, and you're welcome to come there and find out what's going on with the program. With that, can we go to the next slide? So now we're in the feedback and Q&A section, and I will hand it back to Russ.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks everybody. So now we'll turn to the Q&A pod, and we'll have Chantel read out their questions, and then I'll be able to respond to them. If there's questions you have, please remember to put them in the Q&A pod. Chantel can read them to us and we'll get them answered. If there's additional questions that are left unanswered, you see an email address here on the screen that you can use, and we'll do our best to get back to you swiftly. Thank you very much. Chantel?
Thank you, Russ. Our first question is from Nigel Hickson. And Nigel asks, can you tell us who is on the steering committee?
I'll go ahead and take that question. Thank you, Nigel. The steering committee is made up of several members of ICANN, obviously. It's comprised mostly of subject matter leads from the various departments and functions within ICANN. We've got people from GDS, Global Domains and Strategy, such as Russ. There's the Accounts and Services team. There's the Strategic Initiatives, Policy Research, and Stakeholder Programs team, and the Review Support and Accountability as well. We also have members of Contractual Compliance, the legal team, OCTO, the Office of the Chief Technology Officer, members from the policy team, the Global Stakeholder Engagement team, communications, and finance as well.
Thank you, Chris. Our next question is from Alex Maltinsky, and Alex asks, are ICANN security efforts focused solely on the registered domains themselves, or are there efforts around the security of the DNS servers? DNS-related malicious activity sometimes targets specific DNS servers.
Okay, I'll take this one if you'll allow me. I'm John Crane. I'm ICANN's Chief Security, Stability and Resilience Officer. So this specific steering committee is focused on DNS security threats and the issues around DNS abuse, to use the wider term that gets used. So this specific committee is very much focused on issues around registered names. With that said, though, ICANN has a much broader focus when it comes to security of the DNS. So we do have programs related to other security issues. For many years, we actually started doing trainings back in 2004. We've worked with registries and registrars around securing infrastructure, DNSSEC, and other security related matters. So ICANN itself is much broader. We also have a program ongoing at the moment with hopefully a report coming out sometime in the late third or fourth quarter of this year, called the DNS Security Facilitation Initiative, which has a technical study group which will be bringing out recommendations to the CEO on various other security issues. So while this particular security committee, steering committee, focuses very much on the issues around names, ICANN itself has a much broader set of programs and topics related to security.
Thank you, John. Our next question is from Andy Budamansa. Why in filing an abuse complaint with ICANN is not involved the registrar or does not involve the registry, but only directly from the registrar to ICANN?
Hi, this is Roger. If you have an abuse complaint, you can actually file it with the registry as well at their published abuse contact. The registries usually take actions on their own, or they may actually send it to the registrar for investigation as well. On the contractual compliance complaints, most of the abuse complaints we receive relate to section 3.18 of the registrar accreditation agreement, which requires registrars to investigate and respond to abuse reports. And therefore, a compliance team will ensure that registrars comply with this obligation. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, Roger. Our next question is from Susan Payne. Could Jan expand on the RR audit, please? Specifically, it is not an audit of all RRs.
Yes, I just posted a link in reply to your question in the Q&A window. We explained the methodology behind selection of registrars in the announcement that is published. I'm not sure if you can see the link, but again, I just posted it in Q&A. In brief answer is we picked the registrars that had 5 or more domains listed in RBLs as being abusive.
Thank you very much. Our next question is from Mason Cole. Mason asks, how do you integrate various third-party reports about DNS abuse and SSR threats into your work?
Hi, this is Samana. Mason, we have the third-party reports, what we call the reputation block list, the RBLs, as an input into the DAR system. So basically, we have a selection of reputation block lists which we overlap with the domains that are in the GTLD zone files and for CCTLDs in their zone files. And then we check the number of times domains per TLD appear in those or listed in those lists.
Thank you, Samana.
And I think the question is also about not only the reputation block list. Mason, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think you're also talking about reports that either individuals or institutions publish along the lines of research reports. And those we certainly are paying attention to and digesting and trying to interpret, is there an opportunity here? Is there a risk? Is there something we need to dig into? So we talk about those at our steering committee meetings quite regularly and identify if there's more follow-up research that needs to be done, if we need to better understand what the authors were seeing and follow up with them. And then think about, is there something there for ICANN to be doing differently? So thanks very much, good question.
Our next question is from Catherine Condello. Assuming a valid complaint, what is the average time to resolve the issue?
Hi, this is Roger again. So our compliance process can take up to 15 business days. However, there are different complexities in different complaint types, so there may be a variation in that depending on the complexity of the complaint itself. So, but the official process is about up to 15 business days. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next question is from Rajiv Kumar. Is the list of security threat domain names available for analysis?
The list is not available through DAR. DAR only creates aggregate numbers per TLD. However, since we are using public reputation block lists and the methodology is replicable, if you follow the methodology, you can access the lists that we use, and therefore the domains that have been reported as security threat.
Thank you. Our next question is from Rishab. Is the DAR system reports does the DAR system report all kinds of abuses? Can you please give an overview of how it works?
Sure, Rishabh. The DAR focuses on phishing, malware, command and control domains, and spam domains as a delivery mechanism. And these are the, as Russ explained early in the presentation, these are the type of security threats that fit within the scope of ICANN. There was a second part to the question, which I didn't get to fully read. Well, I will wait to see if more questions come in this regard.
Samana, the second part of the question was if you could give an overview of how it works.
This is John. That would take a long time. So I would recommend going to the website that was listed in the slides, where there is a complete methodology document. And I think this will be one of the topics that we come back with a broader presentation on as we do them quite regularly. And if interested, participate in one of those.
Thank you, John. Our next question is from Nigel. If a member of the public makes a complaint about a site direct to ICANN, is that passed to the relevant registrar or logged as an invalid query? Is that sensible?
Hi, this is Roger again. If we do receive a complaint directly to ICANN, we will provide information to the complainant that allows them to file an abuse report to the registrar, so that they can actually, registrars can investigate and respond to the abuse report. However, if we are made aware of any serious violations that may actually impact the safety, security, and resiliency of the internet, we will proactively enforce the contracts. Hopefully that helps you. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is from Gagan. What are the common DNS exploitation trends specific to phishing or malware campaigns amidst the COVID-19 pandemic?
Okay, so this gets quite deep into the DNS Sticker program. So I would ask for this, Gagan, you can send a question directly to me if you want in writing to john.crane@icann.org, and we will try to answer it. Also, we can do another seminar that goes into the actual DNS Sticker program and some of the findings there, if that is useful. I really want to keep this about the steering committee and not go too deep into the technical elements of this, but quite happy to help answer those questions offline if that's useful to you.
Thank you, John. I will note that there was one question that came after this one from Reg Levy. And her question was, thank you for describing how ICANN selected registrars for the audit. Can you please clarify what % of accredited registrars were represented by that cross-section? And Jan responded that there were 125 which were selected. We have another question in the Q&A pod from Oluwatoba. How can CCTLDs participate with the DAR program?
In short, there is a whole process lined out. I will paste the link to the process here in the chat. But in short, any CCTLD who is interested to join the project, they can email our colleagues in the global support. So global support@icann.org. Our colleagues will help them to get their zone files on board and also to set access to the ICANN monitoring system, the MOS API. After that, the CCTLs will be in contact with the SSR group within the OCTO team to receive their personalized monthly reports.
Thank you very much. Russ, I would like to turn the floor back over to you.
Great. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today and for participating in the webinar. We got some great questions and some good feedback. And obviously, I think we identified a couple areas where we can provide future seminars to get more into the details of some of the things we presented here. So just a thank you to our panelists and speakers today. A thank you to our attendees, and of course to our interpreters on the phone. Thank you very much for your great work that you're doing. If you have any questions, we have the email address here, or you can contact me directly. With that, I'll give you guys about 5 minutes back. Thank you very much, and stay safe out there.